What's going on, everyone? Welcome back. Today, we've got another 2022 NFL mock draft for you, and this is pretty much the post-NFL free agency version. The majority of big moves have taken place. There have been trades, there have been signings. So naturally, it's time to look at another mock draft because there are a lot of selections that have changed. So we need to go ahead and break them down. That's exactly what we will do today. A quick note, this will probably be the last version where we're excluding trades because there might be a couple more, signings trickling in, things like that. So our next version will include that, no worries. But in the meantime, you know the drill. If you enjoy, hit that like button, subscribe. Let us hear it in the comment section. Do you agree, disagree? I love the interaction. What do you think your favorite team should do, and who do you want them to draft? But in the meantime, let's kick it off. And as usual, we start with the Jacksonville Jaguars at the 101. Now, previously here, I had offensive linemen as the pick. Now, what the Jaguars did is they franchised Cam Robinson and then also brought in Brendan Scherf on that offensive line. So all of a sudden, there is a conversation now about Aiden Hutchinson being the 101. And I do think it's fair to an extent, and it'll probably be either him or an offensive lineman. Now, personally, I think this is going to be a situation where I kind of go back and forth on. We'll get some more clarity as we get closer to the draft. I'm going to switch things up here a little bit. When it's all said and done, I'll probably still prioritize offensive linemen a little bit, just because I think edge rushers, there's some more options, especially early in the second round. But for now, let's see how this plays out. We'll go Aiden Hutchinson here with the 101. And then going to pick number 2 here, we have got the Detroit Lions. And look, before I had them going with Aiden Hutchinson. So now, in my opinion, you go the next best available edge rusher. That is Kayvon Thibodeaux here. You can make the case again that, hey, the Lions need to go a quarterback. Malik Willis is a guy that they've been linked to, but I continue to say this is way, way, way too early for a quarterback. Compared to other quarterback classes, I don't think this one is even, in the same atmosphere. In my opinion, there shouldn't be a quarterback drafted in the top 5. I could even make the case in the top 10. So I'm going to keep it like this, at least for the top 5 picks. The Lions do have a second first-round selection where they can potentially add a quarterback there. So let's go Kayvon Thibodeaux here. And then going to pick number 3, we've got the Houston Texans. Now, obviously, the main thing that the Texans did is trade away Deshaun Watson, and that gives you some extra picks, that gives you extra ammunition on a roster that needs a lot of help. The way I would personally attack this is go offensive lineman. You don't know how long Tunsil is going to be there. He's getting up in age. Other than him, that offensive line is questionable. Who do I think is the best option here as far as versatile offensive linemen go? To me, that is Ikem Ekwonu from North Carolina State. I had him as my top offensive lineman beforehand. I'm sticking to it. Now moving on to the Jets here. They're another team where I think you can make a case they need help across the board. They've got a defensive-minded head coach, so wouldn't shock me if this is potentially a pick in terms of edge rusher, in terms of DB, but they've also got a young, a young quarterback in Zach Wilson. So I do think offensive linemen will be in play here. But at the end of the day, I'm going to go with, kind of that defensive mentality here. And I'm going to go with an area of need at the defensive back position here. I'm going to go with my top corner in Ahmad Gardner. I think he's going to be the top cornerback taken in this draft class. And then, the Jets, after a couple more selections, they're on the board again. I think they'll have a chance to go offensive lineman there again, or one of those other areas of need. Then we go to the New York Giants, and I think this is pretty much a very easy pick. If you've got one of the top 2 offensive linemen on the board, that is the direction you need to go. You've surrounded Daniel Jones with weapons. Now get him that protection that he's desperately needed for a while. That next best available offensive lineman to me is Evan Neal. So let's add him to the squad. And then we get to the Carolina Panthers. So the Panthers in free agency, they miss out on the Deshaun Watson sweepstake, which I think is potentially better for them because they would have absolutely had to have sold the farm to get him. And if it meant also parting ways with guys like Jeremy Chin or Brian Burns, no thank you. So what do you do here? Do you go quarterback because, well, who else is left? I don't think that the Panthers, looking at the free agent quarterback market, you've got names like maybe a Jimmy Garoppolo, a Matt Ryan, but are any of those guys going to be traded? In reality, we don't know. So quarterback is very much so on the table here. But I think with having somebody like a Charles Cross available here at number 6, they did add some offensive line pieces in free agency, but this was an offensive line that needed a lot, and I mean a lot of help. So I think you need to draft an offensive lineman here. Again, this pick, I think, unless they trade back, will be either a quarterback or an offensive lineman. Before I had Kenny Pickett, I'm going to switch it up here because Charles Cross is available and go with him. Now, Giants back on the board. Again, you see their needs. They have a lot of needs on that offensive line, but they could also use some help on the defensive line. I think since they already got Evan Neal, you don't necessarily need to rush at that position again, potentially reach. So here we're going to go with an edge rusher, a guy in Travon Walker that has been going up draft boards. I think he could very well be the third edge rusher taken off the board, either him or Jermaine Johnson. So I'm going to go with him here to the New York Giants. Then we have got the Atlanta Falcons picking next, and with them, obviously we know no Calvin Ridley. Russell Gage signs with the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. They had a whole fiasco with Deshaun Watson. It seemed like he was destined to go to Atlanta, and they were going to move on from Matt Ryan. Now that's a little bit questionable, but it doesn't erase the need for a wide receiver. Again, they could go a plethora of different ways. They could go wide receiver. They could go defense, from that defensive line to the secondary. They could also arguably upgrade the offensive line. I'm going to stick here with a simple pick. They haven't really added any big name wide receivers, even though there's still some serviceable guys available. I'm going to go with Drake London here. He's my top wide receiver. And then we work our way down to the Seattle Seahawks, who, again, similar to last mock, they kind of benefit here because no other team has taken a quarterback. I think really the only other team that'd be in play for that here is the Carolina Panthers. Maybe the Detroit Lions is a serious dark horse. But since we don't have any trade-ups here, again, I think the Seattle Seahawks, they haven't landed a big-time player at the quarterback position after moving on from Russell Wilson. So you got to go quarterback here. And to me, that's probably going to be Malik Willis, the number one guy on a lot of draft boards. So I think it only makes sense. Afterwards, we now get back to the New York Jets, and our first pick had them going with Ahmad Gardner. Now, again, here, you could stick on the defensive side of the football, and having that mentality, I would not be shocked if that is the case. I think a guy here, I mentioned him briefly beforehand, Jermaine Johnson. He had huge performances in the combine prior to that. I think he could very well be in play here and probably will be a top 10 or top 15 pick. So he goes to the New York Jets. Now we have got Washington, and I think this is, very lucky for them. Kyle Hamilton is still on the board. Yes, they got Carson Wentz. You could argue he's not a long-term solution. Maybe somebody like a Kenny Pickett here, Corral. But I think Kyle Hamilton, the value is too good to pass up. A safety just being drafted in the top 5, I think that's way too early. Just one of those positional values that I don't think have as much worth as an edge rusher, as much as an offensive lineman. And there's several of those guys that should go in the top 10. So here, I'm going to go with Kyle Hamilton. Washington in this mock gets extremely, extremely lucky. You can make the case that Hamilton is one of the safest picks in this entire draft class. And, just in general, one of the best players available. Next, we have got the Minnesota Vikings. Again, they could go a number of different ways. We know Kirk Cousins is there to stay. They could go offensive line. They could go edge rusher. They could go cornerback. I think this is just one of those cases where you have a team and you have a fit. And to me, it's either going to be edge rusher or cornerback. And I'm going to go cornerback similar to what I did last time. Derek Stingley, the number 2 guy here. Yes, he's got some question marks. You can make a case for Trent McDuffie. But I think, maybe the Vikings are going to be a little bit more enamored with Stingley. So let's go that way. Now we've got the Houston Texans back on the clock. And this is obviously their second pick, courtesy of the Deshaun Watson trade. They went Ike Ekwonu with their first pick, which I personally really, really like. So what do you do here for a team that just needs a lot of help in general? Like, you've got Brendan Cooks, and then that's about it. So you can make a case for Garrett Wilson. You can make a case for just next best available player, somebody like a Trent McDuffie, maybe even more offensive line help. But I'll go here with Garrett Wilson. You need to give another weapon to Mills. Brendan Cooks isn't getting any younger. So this is going to be the way this thing kind of plays out from this point on. Next up, we have got the Baltimore Ravens. And the Ravens, they added some DB help, courtesy of Johnson in free agency. And then, some defensive line help, offensive line help. That's kind of what this boils down to. A guy that I really like here for Baltimore. Their center went to Carolina. Linderbaum is somebody that I really, really like here for them. And I think it's, he's going to be undervalued because of his position, but I think offensive lineman, I think Linderbaum is an absolute stud. I'm going to go with him here to Baltimore. I think he's very much deserving of a top 15 pick. Next, we go to the Philadelphia Eagles. They're probably a little bit upset that, Linderbaum was taken as a potential replacement to Jason Kelce. But either way here, they've got a lot of options. They've got back-to-back picks. And I think probably one of these picks will be a linebacker, kind of like their needs are highlighted here. Edge, linebacker, defensive back. And I'm going to go with the cornerback here in Trent McDuffie with their first pick. He's my next available, best available player, best available cornerback as well. I think you could even make the case that he's the second best available cornerback in this entire class. Now back on the clock here, the question becomes, do you go edge rusher? Do you go linebacker? I really like Devin Lloyd here as a potential pick. Looking at some of these other edge rushers, you've got George Karlaftis. David Ojabo suffers that Achilles tear, so I think he's going to fall off big time here and probably not be a first round selection. And I'm looking at these guys. I think, linebacker, while potentially not a position like edge rusher that's as valued, I think Devin Lloyd is a little bit of a safer pick here. So I'm going to go that direction here for the Philadelphia Eagles. Then we go the LA Chargers. And I think this is an absolute dream come true for them. Similar to the Vikings, I think a match made in heaven for the Chargers is Jordan Davis, a big-time defensive tackle. They got cornerback help via J.C. Jackson in free agency, so bring in Jordan Davis here. I love that pick for them. Next up, we've got the New Orleans Saints, and they missed out on the quarterback sweepstakes. They could use some offensive line help. They could use some wide receiver help outside of Michael Thomas. But I'm going to be really interested to see what happens. Are they going to just say, okay, we're riding with Jameis Winston? He's also coming back obviously from a serious injury. So I think very well here, a guy like Kenny Pickett will be in play. And that's the way I'm going to go here. I think he's probably going to be regarded as the number 2 quarterback in this draft class. So the Saints go Kenny Pickett. Next, we have got the Philadelphia Eagles again. And this works out really well for them, in my opinion, because a guy that we were considering beforehand in George Karlaftis is still available. Let's end his kind of free fall here and go with him here to the Philadelphia Eagles. Next, Pittsburgh Steelers. And look, they added Mitch Trubisky. I've been on record saying that I don't think Trubisky is a good starting NFL quarterback. So there's a reason why they only gave him 2 years. To me, you still need to upgrade the offensive line. Yes, they added some guys in free agency, which was nice to see. Don't get me wrong, but I don't think you could say that any of those guys are necessarily superstars. So I'm looking at some of these other offensive linemen, and I really like Trevor Penning, just a mean, nasty guy. I think he would fit very well in Pittsburgh. So let's add him to the squad there. Now we go back. We've got the New England Patriots at 21. What do they do? I think they're in a situation where they've got a lot of needs. They could use cornerback help. They could use edge help, wide receiver help, potentially offensive line help. Just a lot of different areas. Tough for a New England Patriots team. But I think it just makes a lot of sense after losing somebody like J.C. Jackson to go that direction again. Andrew Booth Jr. is, I think in the top 4 conversation for cornerbacks. So he'd be a nice fit here in my opinion. But honestly, I think the Patriots this year could really go a number of different ways. Wouldn't shock me one bit if they end up trading down. Next up, we've got the Green Bay Packers picking at 22. Oh, yeah. Why is that? Because they trade Davante Adams to the Las Vegas Raiders. Kind of caught a lot of people by surprise. We kind of just assumed that once Aaron Rodgers returned to Green Bay, Davante Adams would stay there, even if it was on the franchise tag. That's not the case. So now, if the Packers don't bring in a wide receiver now, I would be absolutely shocked. I think you could argue they don't have a true wide receiver one on that team. Again, there's still some guys out there at wide receiver that they can bring in, some veterans, but you got to bring in some young talent at the position. And to me here, looking at the potential possibilities, I really like Treylon Burks here for them. A guy that's physical, could be that Davante Adams replacement. And I think they need help right away. That's why maybe not going Jameson Williams makes sense. So we're going to go Treylon Burks for them here. Next up, we have got the Arizona Cardinals. So a lot of potential needs for them as well. Which way do they go? They could fortify the defensive line. Chandler Jones no longer there. So, they could add some offensive line help. But I think right now it's a situation where you just go best player available. And I'm looking at it. I really like Devontae Wyatt here. I think he could anchor the middle of that defensive line. So we're going to go in that direction here for the Cardinals. Next up, we've got the Dallas Cowboys. And man, how crazy is it that for the Dallas Cowboys, pretty much that offensive line went from a strength to now losing a plethora of pieces. Leo Collins, Connor Williams. I think this pick needs to be on the offensive line. Some people might say wide receiver. Obviously, Amari Cooper no longer there. But I'm going to go in with offensive linemen here. I'm looking at the possibilities, maybe going somebody like a Darian Kennard. Bernard Ryman is still there as well. Interior offensive lineman, I do like Zion Johnson, but I think, there's a bigger kind of emphasis on the tackle versus guard position. So I could see this being a Ryman pick, and the Dallas Cowboys kind of look at that as a replacement to Collins, something like that. Next, we go to the Buffalo Bills. And man, the big move for the Bills, adding somebody like a Von Miller. Now, this is kind of a luxury pick. They did get rid of Cole Beasley. Stephon Diggs slowly getting a little bit older. Yes, there's some guys there like a Gabe Davis that could potentially, take that next step. But do you really pass up on a chance to get somebody like a Jamison Williams to give to Josh Allen? The rich keep on getting richer. I think that would be a very welcome pick by Josh Allen here. So Jameson Williams, when he's finally fully back healthy, if he didn't get hurt, I think you could argue he's the number one wide receiver in this draft class. Then we go to the Tennessee Titans, and the big move they made recently was trading for Robert Woods. Got him for a very, very reasonable deal. So I really like that pick for them. They released Julio Jones, so that's kind of their replacement. We'll see how that pans out. I think here you could use some offensive line help and, potentially start to build, for that offensive line after the departure of, Taylor. And here, yes, it's a guard position, but I think we've kind of gotten to the point where guard is better value than tackle in terms of talent. So I'm going here with Zion Johnson for the Tennessee Titans. Next, we have the Tampa Bay Bucks. Last time we did this, we didn't have the shocking news that Tom Brady all of a sudden decides to unretire. That retirement lasted all about of 2 months. So now they're saved at that position, but they still need offensive line help. And, specifically at the guard position, I think this is a tremendous fit for Kenyon Green. Good value, good fit. So from that perspective, I think it makes a lot of sense. Next, we have got the Green Bay Packers back on the board here. And look, I think their top two needs, wide receiver, potentially offensive lineman help. They could go edge rusher. But here, I'm looking at somebody like a Darian Kennard. I mentioned him before as somebody that I think could sneak into the first round. I wouldn't be shocked if maybe the Packers kind of trade down at some point either to get more draft capital. But again, since we're not really including that in this mock, I'm going Kennard here to them. Next, moving on, we've got the Miami Dolphins. I think here, the Dolphins narrowly miss out on somebody like a Kennard. Looking at some of these other options at offensive line, because, okay, they got Connor Williams, but, was that enough? Haven't made, too many other big-time moves. Yes, to be fair, there's still some big-time players in terms of offensive linemen that are available. So, maybe they land somebody like an Armstead, which would be a big, big win for them. They added some wide receiver help. So, right now we get into that situation where is it a reach to go offensive lineman, or do you go somebody like a Nakobe Dean? Do you go somebody like, a Chris Olave? I think there's a lot of options here. I'm going to go best player available. To me, that is Nakobe Dean. Just add some more talent on that defense, in my opinion. Afterwards, we go to the Kansas City Chiefs. And here with the Chiefs, again, I think they're in a very nice position just to go best player available. Or, they added Juju Smith-Schuster. That was one of their big free agency move. So I don't think wide receiver is necessarily a area of need for them. Looking at the defensive line, Travis Jones is somebody that I like as a potential fit for them there. Looking at edge rusher, there's gonna be a run, I think, in the second round. But to me here, you could also go cornerback. That's kind of an area of need for them as well, especially after losing the Honey Badger. Again, that'd probably be more in the safety department, so that's something that they could consider. And Lewis Kine is somebody that fits the bill, so I'm going to go in that direction at this point in time. The Bengals, then, offensive lineman help, but they actually did a pretty decent job of getting offensive lineman help in free agency. I mean, they got Lael Collins. They've gotten pieces here, folks, and that's wins for the Cincinnati Bengals. I wouldn't be shocked if they just pass up on the offensive line in this first round and just go another direction. They're stacked at wide receiver. They're good at running back. signing Hayden Hurst as well. They could go on the defensive side of the football. I think right now it's a situation where you don't want to necessarily reach on an offensive lineman because, again, looking at the options that you have, I don't think there's necessarily guys that you say, I absolutely love this dude. So from that perspective, I wouldn't be shocked if they pass an offensive lineman here. To me, you could go with a guy like Elam here. Eli Apple going to return, but he was kind of exposed. So I'm going to go with Elam here for the Cincinnati Bengals. And finally, we have got the Detroit Lions. And to me here, again, I've talked about quarterback is a possibility, even a possibility at number 2. So somebody like a Sam Howell or others could be possibilities. But, they're going to be picking in just a short period of time. And they know the Jaguars don't need a quarterback. So kind of just playing this in a smart way. I think wide receiver, Chris Olave is the next best available wide receiver on my board. Yes, they added DJ Shark, but I don't really think DJ Shark is all that great. So we're going to go with the Ohio State wide receiver here to conclude this mock draft. And with that, as always, let me hear it in the comment section. Did you agree? Disagree? Let me know your thoughts on these selections. If you enjoyed, hit that like button, subscribe, give us a follow on Twitter at AllDayPigskin to continue interacting with us there. And in the meantime, we'll see you guys in future videos.